outside God's grace. Not like that. Anyway, it seems I've lost my religion.
I put no stock in religion. By the word religion, I've seen the lunacy of fanatics of every denomination be called the will of God. I've seen too much religion in the eyes of too many murderers. Holiness is in right action and courage on behalf of those who cannot defend themselves. And goodness, what God desires is here and here. And what you decide to do every day, you will be a good man. Or not. Come.
The king has made a peace with Saladin these past 6 years. He holds Jerusalem as a place of prayer for all faiths, as the Muslims did before we came. These men are Templars. They killed Arabs.
So they are dying for what the Pope would command them to do.
Yes. But not Christ, I think. Not this king.
Come forward. I'm glad to meet Godfrey's son. He was one of my greatest teachers. He was there when, playing with the other boys, my arm was cut. It was he, not my father's physicians, who noticed that I felt no pain. He wept when he gave my father the news that I am a leper. The Saracens say that this disease is God's vengeance against the vanity of our kingdom. As wretched as I am, these Arabs believe that the chastisement that awaits me in hell is far more severe and lasting. If that is true, I call it unfair. Come, sit. You play? The whole world is in chess. Any move can be the death of you. Do anything except remain where you started, and you cannot be sure of your end. Were you sure of your end once?
I was.
What was it?
To be buried 100 yards from where I was born.
And now?
Now I sit in Jerusalem and look upon a king.
When I was 16, I won great victory. But in that moment, I will live to be 100. Now I know I shall not see 30. None of us know our end, really, or what hand will guide us there. A king may move a man. A father may claim a son. That man can also move himself. And only then does that man truly begin his own game. Remember that howsoever you are plagued, or by whom, your soul is in your keeping alone. Even though those who presume to play you be kings or men of power, when you stand before God, you cannot say, "But I was told by others to do thus," or that virtue was not convenient at the time. This will not suffice. Remember that.
John Lilly once put it this way. There are no limits at all to the human mind whatsoever, except those we impose on ourselves because of our beliefs.
And those limits are also beliefs to be transcended. And that's a view that suggests that the possibilities of human transformation are virtually infinite. And we have no way of knowing the outer horizon of what it means to be human.
And really, to understand all this, everything, you have to go very, very deep into a study of history, consciousness, neurophysiology, everything. You have to be the supreme eclectic type of leaning, and you really have to be wanting to know who you are and what everything's about.
And the thing that you'll find when you go to sacred sites, if you're very humble about it, is that you are on a personal journey, and the sacred site will respond to you in a way that is appropriate only to you. The information is always what you are searching for. And it's the intent you give that energy that defines whether it is used for the right action or not. And it is inside these sacred spaces that you will be reminded that you are God, that you are a bright star.
So what you're trying to do is move through the course without ricocheting off walls or creating karma. You're trying to slide through things smoothly. How do you do that? It's called flowing. There's a technique that you can do that will allow you to touch some part of your inner being that has more knowledge than your conscious state does.
My early education was at Otahu Technical College in Auckland, and when I left there I had my matriculation in those days with the top examination at university. But I never went to university, and I'm very pleased that I didn't do that, because
Hey, Kev,
now I would never have had.
this is interesting stuff. I'm to bed. I like to listen to go to sleep.
Contact,
Sometimes people will listen.
CIA to me, actually.
Sometimes they don't.
I
But
asked him,
it's interesting.
why isn't this material mathematics and everything I was finding at that time taught in universities? And he just smiled at me quietly and said,
Thanks
it
for the likes,
is,
guys.
but it's only taught to selected students. They actually pick out the brilliant students. They sign the secrecy acts, and then they're fed into the system. In the early 1950s, there are UFO stories floating around, and like every pilot in New Zealand, I didn't believe it. And I thought it was a lot of nonsense. And then in 1952, I had my first sighting. We watched this thing for 20 minutes. And we noticed another smaller red light, we judged about 5,000 feet to one side, and was slowly circling the big white thing. And suddenly it sort of got brighter, and this red light just went straight up into a clear evening sky. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. Would have been about 6, 7 o'clock, from what I remember. It would be about half an hour before dark. And it was from that point on that I knew, as a pilot, that there was nothing in New Zealand that could do anything like that. Now, how in the hell do these things operate? And how can they do those manoeuvres? Because it was outside any of our science I knew at the time. And that's when I started using some of my own skills in navigation. And I was able to plot on the navigation maps. So I started collecting sightings. And I'd pick out the good sightings that had a hovering position, or something was happening. And there was another local chap in Auckland who was collecting all these UFO sightings from around the world. And there was one particular one in New Zealand. He wanted me, as a pilot, could I plot it for him? And this thing was a gigantic disc at night. And after we actually calculated the size of this thing, must have been around about 2,000 feet in diameter. And went down the west coast of the North Island, passed over New Plymouth, and evidently it disappeared or blinked out over around about Duval Island in the South Island. It's the north of the South Island. And there was three sort of a green objects seemed to come out of it and disappear in various directions. So I plotted that for him. That was my first track line. And it wasn't too long after that I was doing a ferry flight in a DC-3 up the west coast to Kaitara in the North Island from Whakapā. And we were just over an inlet called the Kaikoura Inlet there. And I was looking at my side, and down the tide was nearly out, and there was just a estuary there with, I judged about 30 feet of water deep. And I saw a really, really silvery, streamlined thing looking very similar to a submarine. It had no fins, no conning tower, anything. It was perfectly streamlined shape. But I could just make out a sort of a little thing at the top that we expected sort of a conning tower or something to be, but it wasn't a race.
Thank you, love.
Just enough distance.
Give that with a mouse.
That was the blunt end, the pointed wind was pointing south. So, being pilot, I kept my mouth shut. I didn't want to be ridiculed. I didn't even tell the other guys in the cockpit. The co-pilot couldn't see it, and the other chap was between us, but he's a bit back. So I just put the wing down just a wee bit and just went over the top of this thing and had a good look at it. And then carried on up the coast in a scenic flight. And anyway, when we got home, I told my wife about this, and didn't say anything to anybody. And then it started to bug me now. I shouldn't tell somebody about this. So I contacted the naval base in Auckland, and they described what I'd seen. And they weren't very happy that I hadn't said anything about it before. But when I started plotting, I saw this track line that I'd plotted from this large object going down the coast. If I plotted it backwards, I went right over the top of where I'd seen this thing in the water. And I thought, well, I wonder if that was the same, was on the same track there. And also, there was a report I found from this other chap that said there was a fishing boat just north of New Plymouth, pretty well on that track line I found afterwards. And they'd seen something come out of the sky and dashed right into the water not far from the boat, which gave them one hell of a shock. And they didn't know what it was. Anyway, after I told the Navy, I had a visit from an officer. I didn't know exactly who he was then, but I did have contact a lot with him over the way. He turned out to be the CIA guy. And he took a boat up there with his son with a depth sounder. And he toured back and forth over where I showed him on the map where this was, and he found there was a great big deep hole there, about 100 feet wide and very deep in the seabed, which proved that what I'd said would be something there. And whatever they were doing, I don't know. But anyway, I had that first track line. I was putting the other ones into this map I had. And then about 2 or 3 years later, I think it was, I was in a co-pilot on the DC-3, and the captain and I was on a fairly fine day, and we just passed over a Wanganui point, and we're heading towards our destination in Wellington. And suddenly we both sort of spotted out corner of our eye a large disc similar to the one that I'd plotted before coming out of the stratosphere, and it came down in an arc across Cook Strait in front of us, and about halfway across, two sort of droplets come out of it vertically down and then disappeared at low level, the ice about 10,000 feet. The big object, which later we calculated again about 2,000 feet in diameter, it was so big it had two streaks coming off the sides of it, and when it came into the atmosphere, it disappeared and exploded just around about the same point this other one had come down the west coast, and just sort of big flash and it blinked out, there's nothing there. So I plotted this again on my map and found that these two objects were pretty well at right angles to each other, and I think they were 11 years apart. And I realised straight away now they couldn't have been meteors. There was nothing natural that would come into one point on 90 degrees apart and disappear in the same place. So it had to be a UFO. So that was the starting point of all the plotting in the whole world. And that gave me two very good calculation points. I had all the other bits there, and I started drawing them ended up with a grid system. And I'd got so far, then as I was progressing, I thought, well, now if I've got a section here, does that go all around the world? Is there a massive grid around the world itself? And more time passed, and then in our local paper, there was a photograph. There was an American survey ship called the Altanan, and they were doing a seabed survey. They photographed a antenna type object, and it was around about that height, about 2 foot 6, 3 feet high. And it had a series of crossbars or little knobs on the end and a little small one at the top. And they sort of turned around at certain degrees around this thing. And a journalist and I, later on, the boat called into Auckland, and we managed to con our way onto the boat and talk to the captain. And then we managed to get downstairs and talk to some of the scientists, and they said it was an artefact, that it looked metallic, and it was not a plant, which they've been saying ever since. And there was nothing that grow at that depth. There was no photosynthesis or anything. It was 13,500 feet under the surface. So I got thinking again, had a hunch. Now I wonder if this is one of the points I'm looking for to hook a world system on. So I got the old thinking cap on again, and one day I wandered into my boys' bedroom and pinched their plastic play ball they had there. It was about that size, and I started drawing patterns on it, and eventually came up with a pattern that I'm using right till today. And I centered it on this particular latitude and longitude that they'd seen this area under the sea, and then plotted the other points around the world on the pattern I'd found. And this is time passing. I'm getting more information as it went on. And eventually, I didn't have computers or calculators in those days. I had to have everything longhand. And this chap that eventually turned out to be a CIA chap, he visited me and he started helping me work out great circle tracks with logs and haversines, and I'm doing it the slow way. It took me days to do calculations. And I actually calculated the actual grid area around here, which when you project on a flat plane come out to be what I call the polar square. And when I analysed it and got all the coordinates, eventually I found that I could associate that with the speed of light, gravity and mass. And when I was juggling these figures, I found that I could put them all together, and I found that the combination gave me the square root of the speed of light and the M value, and turned out to be mass was C plus the square root of 1 over C, just from those little bits of peaked information. So back to the drawing board again, then I thought, well, now, what did Einstein say? And Einstein's comment was, the whole of our reality is manifested by the geometrics of space and time. I thought, well, okay, I've got the geometrics, I've got the speed of light there, and the other bits. Time wasn't in the value at that stage. So I thought, well, okay, if he always said that if they could take M out of that equation, it would be a unified equation, all in C values. So I took his M out and put my bit in, which was M equals C plus the square root of 1 over C, and it unified the equation. And time is going on again, and then I found that I could actually manipulate that equation and find things with it. And eventually I got to the stage where I found matter. We just didn't have matter. We had matter and antimatter, and the scientists were calling this dark matter. And they couldn't explain why this other dark matter existed in space, but they didn't call it antimatter, which is dark matter, and why it was there. And I formed a theory that this dark matter was antimatter, and our reality was manifested in pulses or quantums, as they say, but the antimatter was also being manifested in quantums, but they're at the other side of our matter. So I thought, now what do I do if I double the C value and allow for the antimatter cycle? And that gave me a whole series of findings when I doubled the C value to allow for this antimatter cycle. In other words, our reality is not a constant one. It's been manifested in pulses. Between our pulses of matter, there's an antimatter pulse which we can't perceive. So if you liken that to a strip of movie film where you're having static pictures and then a gap, static picture and a gap, when they move this through a movie projector, they block it off and then bring the next one in and block it off, and that gives us a time base. Anyway, I progressed with my work, and I found that I could start looking at other things around the world and using these basic mathematics, and I started calling it harmonic mathematics. I found I wasn't getting perfect answers, and there must be, I wondered if there was any time difference. And I finally found that if I used a time base of 27 segments in one revolution of the Earth instead of 24, everything was perfect, and I was getting perfect answers all the time. So I then had all my work in grid geodetic measure and grid time, and from there on my work progressed pretty quickly. I checked ancient places around the world like the pyramids and Stonehenge, and I found that they were sitting on these geometric points, and I could analyse these ancient places in these values and get answers from them. In other words, when those things were built thousands and thousands of years ago, those people knew this secret mathematics, harmonic mathematics. And to this day, even though I've been behind the scenes, I've been offered various things that nobody will admit this mathematics exists. I've got a fair way with the sort of grid pattern over New Zealand itself, and had it plotted on a map, plotting map. And I was still finding things and still working quietly in bits and pieces. And then one morning we were at the airfield, co-pilot arrived, and we were on an early flight. And he said to me, I spotted a funny looking antenna on the way out to the airfield, and I wonder what it was, because they knew I was hunting for things. They sort of got around the pilot, said, oh, Kathy's a bit queer in the head, but he's hunting for different things, and various ones that tell me things, and they say. Anyway, I thought, well, that is funny. I wonder if there's any more of them around. So I started on my days off. I spent 3 months on the days off going all over Auckland and spotting different antennas and plotting them. And then a journalist friend joined me, and we thought, okay, if we can plot these things, I wonder if we can pre-plot one by searching the pattern and seeing where these lines are going. And we got a certain place where two of them crossed perfectly, and it was away from where I'd been working before. So the next day we got in the car and went there, and there it was, and we turned the corner. We pre-plotted, we did that 3 times. So it seemed to be connected with the system I was finding. And I thought, well, okay, somebody knows something that I don't know. And I thought then that I was getting into really dangerous territory, and I better start protecting myself. And so I thought, well, there's only one man to go to, that's the Prime Minister. I better tell him what I'm up to and ask him if it's all right. So I wrote a 2-page long letter to the Prime Minister, Sakit Hollier, and explained what I was doing, and I was wanting to publish it in a book. And was it all right? Well, was there anything there that would be detrimental to my country? And I've just got the letter, a copy of the letter here I got back. Now this is dated 18th of September 1968, and I'll read it. Dear Captain Cathy, I have your letter of the 3rd of September and have noted your report on the extensive survey of unidentified flying objects, which you have cited whilst in charge of aircraft operated by the New Zealand National Airways Corporation. You seek my direction as to whether there is any reason why publication of the facts would be harmful to the security of New Zealand. I have made appropriate inquiries, as a result of which there appears to be no reason why you should not publish the book which you have in mind. In other words, he gave me free rein, and that letter has protected me for all that time up till today. And I'm 77 years old now, and I've had threats, and the publishers, when I started publishing my books, they warned me before the first book came out. They said there'll be various attempts to compromise you in a lot of different ways. They are honey traps and all the things you can think of if you're away from home on overnights. And they said, well, be very careful who you talk to, who you meet, and size things up. So I did that in my whole flying life. And I was always aware of where I was, who was there. And, but there are two particular occasions I'll mention.
Hey, Ethics, welcome. Andre Hodge, Infinite Potential Healing and Servant of Truth with you once more with what I feel will be a very potent offering of truth that might not be too pleasant, but it will really be a codex to decode so much that's going on. And really, I think for a lot of people that do have the courage to really take on board what I say here and integrate it, will be a massive conscious Tetris upgrade of all the levels, and you'll see through so much going on and the level of scale of things and the coordination and the genius of it, right? But also the diabolical nature of it, and many who we've probably interacted with or listened to or thought we could trust that are actually totally in alignment with what's rolling out, and that's why the world is how it is. And seems like we're being massively set up for failure because we've probably trusted people that we should have had some reference of this truth to be able to discern. And I would offer just a lot of what I've had the courage to share, right? Go into this public field. It's not my nature at all. I was very hidden in my cubby, comfortable not being seen, like probably a lot of you are out there that haven't crossed that inner Rubicon of showing your face or making a video or putting a perspective out or even to say publicly supporting me or anything like that. I've been out my own. It is what it is, I get it, and it's not a pleasant thing to do. And I just, for me it was like that there's such a massive gap of what's going on. And I've talked about my journey and who I've been involved with and stuff, and I felt like I didn't really have the level of stuff to offer that a lot of other people out there do, so I chose to support them and help them form a platform or be known and stuff like that. And maybe I've just got a freaking lot of freaking karma of all the crap and the Michelin star, 3-star Michelin bullshit artists that I've supported over the years and had a lot of life consequence stuff, but I'm still here and stronger for it and wiser, and I've translated a lot of that into the sovereignty declaration. That's a tool there, and ideally shortcut a lot for a lot of people to really accelerate their awareness in a quick amount of time to get up to speed, to at least be in a position to do something or be in inaction or go back to the 3D and use what I've offered to have a better life, right? Whatever it is. But I think like what we're all sort of feeling and that subtle, uncomfortable gut feel is that it doesn't matter what you do, there's a big setup for failure. And I feel like there's real big endgame chess moves going on that if we don't do something